Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just an adventure movie, it was a full-blown, barely contained explosion of accidents, improvisation, and chaos that somehow produced one of the greatest films ever made. Behind the whip cracks and boulder chases were real injuries, last-minute decisions, and secrets tucked into the corners of the frame that fans are still discovering today. These are 15 weird facts about Raiders of the Lost Ark you likely didn't know. Tell me in the comments which one surprises you the most. Before the first boulder rolled or a single snake slithered on camera, the production faced a real-life crisis: Tunisia. The heat regularly climbed past 120 degrees, food spoiled in minutes, and the set became a breeding ground for stomach-destroying bacteria. One by one, the cast and crew dropped with violent dysentery, fever, cramps, non-stop dehydration. Harrison Ford spent entire days fighting nausea between takes. George Lucas was miserable. Even the stunt team was wiped out, but somehow, one person never got sick: Steven Spielberg. While the rest of the crew gambled on local catering, Spielberg played it safe by eating only canned SpaghettiOs he brought from home. He lined his trailer with them, avoided every meal on set, and ended up being the only major team member who stayed healthy the entire shoot. And the worst part? Tunisia wasn't even the strangest setback the film had coming. One of the most iconic moments in the film, the swaggering swordsman showing off his blade before Indy casually shoots him, wasn't scripted at all. In the original plan, it was a full-blown action showcase. Indy was supposed to whip the sword out of the assassin's hand, dodge attacks, and end the fight with a dramatic stunt. The choreography had been rehearsed, props prepared, and extras placed, but Harrison Ford was barely standing. Thanks to the Tunisian sickness ripping through the cast, he was dehydrated, feverish, and running to the bathroom between takes. There was no way he could handle a multi-minute fight scene in the scorching heat, so Ford pitched a desperate idea. "What if I just shoot him?" Spielberg paused, laughed, and rolled with it. One take, one gunshot, instant movie magic. Little did they know this improvised moment would become one of the most beloved scenes in action movie history, and the chaos behind it was just getting started. Before Harrison Ford ever cracked a whip, another actor had already claimed the fedora: Tom Selleck. Spielberg and Lucas were convinced he was perfect, charming, rugged, effortlessly charismatic. Selleck didn't just audition, he screen-tested in full costume, complete with a hat, whip, and leather jacket. He nailed it. The studio was ready. Spielberg was relieved. They believed they had their Indiana Jones. But then CBS stepped in. Selleck was locked into Magnum PI, and the network refused to release him from his contract. Even more ironic, Magnum PI ended up delayed, meaning he actually could have filmed Raiders, but the decision was already made, and the role had slipped away. Selleck later admitted losing Indy broke his heart. But his exit opened the door for Harrison Ford to step in at the absolute last minute, and Ford's involvement would only get weirder from there. Before Indiana Jones sounded like a legend, he almost sounded like your next-door neighbor's accountant. George Lucas was dead set on naming the character Indiana Smith, believing it had the old serial adventure vibe he loved. Spielberg hated it immediately. He said it didn't roll off the tongue and felt painfully bland. But Lucas dug in. The two went back and forth, tossing around alternatives like Wyoming, Montana, even Dakota Jones, names that sounded less like heroes and more like discontinued pickup trucks. Nothing clicked. Then, someone suggested something almost laughably simple: keep Indiana, change Smith, and make him Indiana Jones instead. Suddenly it felt mythic, sharp, punchy, like a name carved into the side of a lost temple. Spielberg loved it instantly. Lucas reluctantly agreed. It was a tiny change that transformed a forgettable placeholder into one of the most iconic names in movie history. And just like the name, the danger on set was about to get real. The chaotic bar fight in Nepal was always meant to be explosive, but the danger became a little too real for Karen Allen. During rehearsals, the flames were carefully controlled, but once the cameras rolled, something went wrong. A burst of fire leapt farther than expected and caught the back of Allen's jacket, racing up the fabric far faster than anyone anticipated. For a terrifying moment, no one realized the flames were real. The scene was already filled with smoke, shattered bottles, and frantic movement, so the fire blended in. It wasn't until a crew member saw the blaze creeping toward Alan's shoulders that they rushed over and smothered it. Alan was shaken but unharmed, and she insisted on finishing the scene. That slightly panicked look you see in the final cut, it wasn't acting. She'd just come inches from a stunt turning into a disaster. And she wasn't the only cast member who found themselves dangerously close to trouble. As if dysentery wasn't enough, Harrison Ford pushed his body even further during one of the film's stunt-heavy sequences. While performing a jump in the desert, something Indy was supposed to handle with ease, Ford landed wrong and tore a ligament in his knee. The pain was immediate. His knee swelled, stiffened, and he could barely bend it. A doctor recommended flying him back to London for surgery. Production would have shut down for weeks. Ford refused. Instead, he wrapped the knee, took painkillers, gritted his teeth, and kept filming. If you look closely, you can see him favoring one leg in several scenes. That exhausted, limping walk wasn't a character choice. That was Harrison Ford fighting to stay upright, determined not to delay the movie. When Spielberg demanded realism for The Well of Souls, he took it to an extreme. Instead of rubber snakes or puppets, the production brought in over 7,000 live snakes, cobras, pythons, vipers, and harmless species all writhing together on the temple floor. The moment Harrison Ford steps into the chamber wasn't movie magic. It was his actual phobia igniting on camera. But the most dangerous moment came when a cobra struck toward Karen Allen. A thin sheet of plexiglass, almost invisible to the camera, was the only thing separating her from a potentially deadly bite. If you pause the scene at the right angle, you can actually see its reflection. Handlers were bitten. Snakes escaped into the studio rafters. The heat lamps made the snakes more active. It was chaos layered on top of chaos, and just when you think it can't get weirder, other animals soon caused equal trouble. One of the strangest moments in Raiders is also one of the most unsettling, the tiny monkey giving a Nazi salute. It's quick, creepy, and weirdly memorable. But filming that moment turned into one of the most frustrating challenges of the entire shoot. The monkey was adorable, but absolutely refused to lift its paw on cue. Trainers tried every trick, hand signals, treats, sound prompts, but the monkey just blinked at them and did nothing. Days were slipping away, and Spielberg didn't want to cut the shot. That's when a handler finally came up with a bizarre solution. A grape on a fishing line. They dangled it just above the monkey's head, slightly out of reach. Each time he reached up to grab it, Spielberg rolled camera. The result? A creepy, perfectly timed salute created not by acting, but by pure, snack-driven instinct. And the monkey wasn't the only performer dealing with unexpected terrors on set. Imagine your very first day in Hollywood. Now imagine spending it covered in live tarantulas. That was Alfred Molina's introduction to film acting, playing Sadapo, Indy's ill-fated guide. He had to stand perfectly still as dozens of spiders crawled across his back. There was just one problem. They didn't move at all. Spielberg wanted frantic, unsettling motion, but the male tarantulas simply sat there, treating Molina like a fuzzy, stationary tree. Then the animal handler revealed the issue. They were all male, and male tarantulas don't move without a reason. So they placed one female on Molina's shoulder. Instantly, the males came alive, scuttling and climbing over each other to reach her. Molina stayed frozen the entire time, maintaining character while genuine tarantula chaos erupted across his body. It was the kind of initiation no acting school could ever prepare him for. And the production had even bigger challenges ahead. Indiana Jones's jacket didn't just look dirty, battered, and lived in. It was practically a biological weapon by the end of filming. Spielberg wanted the leather to feel like it had survived years of deserts, tombs, and close calls long before Indy ever appeared on screen. A normal distressing process wasn't good enough. So the costume department went unconventional. First, they dragged the jacket behind a truck to rough up the leather. Then they scraped it with wire brushes, ground it into dirt, and scuffed every inch by hand. But the final touch, the one that gave it that grimy, perfectly weathered texture, was actual horse sweat. The team collected jars of it from stables, then rubbed it directly into the jacket to create realistic staining and creasing. It smelled awful, looked incredible, and instantly made the costume feel legendary. One of the most brutal and unforgettable action moments in Raiders is the truck drag sequence. Indy gets tossed over the hood, falls beneath the vehicle, and is dragged across the dirt as he claws his way back up. It feels dangerous because it was dangerous. And here's the weird part. Harrison Ford did the entire stunt himself. Spielberg originally planned to use a stunt double, but Ford insisted on doing it. The only safety measure was a shallow trench dug into the road so his body could slide beneath the vehicle without being crushed. Ford wore a thin, hidden harness, but beyond that, it was pure grit and precision. When you watch the scene today, every grimace, every struggle, every dusty breath, that's Ford genuinely fighting to stay alive beneath a moving truck. To the cast and crew, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a prop. It became something eerily close to holy. Spielberg insisted the Ark be handled with an almost ritual level of respect. When they weren't filming, the crew kept it locked inside a wooden crate, just like the one in the film, to keep people from casually walking by it or touching it. Spielberg believed that if the actors treated the Ark as dangerous and mysterious off-camera, that fear and reverence would translate on film. And strangely, it worked. Crew members later admitted they started feeling uneasy around it, as if the thing really was holding something ancient and unknowable. During scenes where the Ark is opened, several actors said the set went unnervingly quiet. No joking, no casual chatter, just a weird tension hanging in the air. And that tension only grew once the stunts started getting even more dangerous. The giant rolling boulder might look like movie magic, but it was terrifyingly real and heavier than the crew expected. Built from fiberglass and mounted on hidden rails, the boulder still weighed over 300 pounds, enough to crush someone if anything went wrong. Harrison Ford insisted on performing the run himself, sprinting down the narrow tunnel with almost no room for error. Spielberg shot several takes, each time asking Ford to run closer and closer to the rolling mass for maximum tension. By the final take, the boulder nearly clipped Ford's heel. If you watch the scene carefully, you can see him genuinely stumble in fear, not acting as the massive sphere barrels toward him. Stunt coordinators later admitted there was no safe version of that shot, only versions where Harrison Ford didn't get flattened. One of the most breathtaking moments in Raiders is the map room sequence, when the beam of sunlight hits Indy's staff and illuminates the location of the Well of Souls. It looks like sophisticated special effects, but the truth is far stranger. The entire shot relied on real sunlight, precisely timed and manipulated with almost obsessive detail. Spielberg wanted authenticity, so instead of using artificial lighting, the crew constructed the set outdoors in Tunisia. To get the perfect beam, they tracked the sun's position and planned the shot for a specific window of time when the light would slice through the miniature like a laser. If they missed it, they'd have to wait an entire day to try again. The golden glow you see on screen? That's the actual Tunisian sun hitting the map in real time. No CGI, no post-production magic. And the next secret pushed realism even further. Parents expected a thrilling adventure. What they didn't expect was one of the most disturbing scenes ever put into a PG-rated movie. When the Ark opens and the Nazi agents' faces melt, bubble, and explode, audiences in 1981 were horrified. Kids screamed, adults covered their eyes, and the MPAA was flooded with complaints demanding to know how this scene was allowed in a family film. Spielberg had pushed the limits intentionally, but even he thought the ratings board might force cuts. Somehow, they didn't. The movie kept its PG rating, just with a stern warning, and the face melt stayed intact, but the uproar was so intense that it sparked a national conversation about movie violence. Just a few years later, partly because of Raiders, the MPAA introduced a brand new middle rating, PG-13. One gruesome effect didn't just terrify audiences, it changed Hollywood forever. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just filmed, it was survived. Every wild setback, last-second fix, and accidental stroke of genius helped shape a movie that still feels alive over 40 years later. These strange behind-the-scenes stories prove lightning doesn't strike once, it strikes nonstop. Tell me in the comments which fact blew your mind. And if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you'll love this one.